There was a time long ago when a single name commanded awe across the known world, Rome. From the muddy banks of the Tiber River, where shepherds and farmers first laid their stones, grew a force so relentless. It would stretch from the cold shores of Britannia to the burning sands of Africa, from the pillars of Hercules to the deserts of Syria. Rome was not just a city. It was an idea, a promise of order, power, and destiny. Its strength was not forged in chance, but in discipline. The Roman legion, a machine of men, marched with precision that shook the earth beneath their sandals. Roads stretched across continents, aqueducts carried water to millions, and law bound together a mosaic of peoples and nations. From generals to engineers, senators to slaves, each cog turned the vast machinery of empire. And yet, Rome was more than iron and stone. Within its walls rose temples and amphitheatres, arches that pierced the sky, and forums where the hum of voices echoed the debates of power. It absorbed the wisdom of Greece, the mysticism of the East, and the traditions of countless cultures, weaving them into something enduring, something immortal. But the brilliance of empire was not without its shadows. Conquest demanded blood. Glory was bought at the price of lives lost in battlefields and arenas. Wealth flowed into the city, but so too did corruption, greed, and decadence. The very heart that once pulsed with ambition began to falter under the weight of its own grandeur, and yet Rome has never truly died. In our laws, our languages, our cities, even in the very architecture that surrounds us, we see her reflection. Rome taught the world how to rule, how to build, and perhaps most profoundly, how even the mightiest of empires are still mortal. This was the age when Rome ruled the earth. In the beginning, Rome was nothing more than a whisper on the banks of the Tiber, a cluster of huts perched upon 7 hills, surrounded by marshland and forests. The people who lived there were not kings of the world, nor masters of armies. They were shepherds, farmers, traders, humble folk surviving in the shadows of greater powers, yet within them burned something that would alter the fate of mankind, an unshakable will to endure. Legend tells us Rome was born of gods and wolves, Romulus and Remus, twin brothers raised by a she-wolf's feral strength. Whether myth or memory, the story mattered, for it shaped how Romans saw themselves. Chosen, destined, set apart from the ordinary. They believed the earth itself had marked them for greatness. As centuries passed, this small community hardened. They fought their neighbours, the Etruscans, the Latins, the Sabines, the Sabines. Every battle was a lesson, every defeat a teacher, and slowly Rome grew. The city that began as mud and timber became stone and iron. Walls rose. Markets bustled. A senate was formed, where men debated, argued, and forged laws that would one day shape half the world. But Rome's true genius was not simply in war, nor in politics. It was in absorption. Wherever Rome went, it did not merely conquer. It consumed. The gods of Greece became Rome's own. The strategies of Carthage became lessons for Roman generals, and the philosophies of distant lands were woven into its identity. Rome was not afraid to learn, to take, and to remake the world in its own image. With each generation, the Romans pushed outward. First, they claimed the Italian peninsula, fighting tooth and nail against tribes and city-states. Then came the Mediterranean, the great sea they called Mare Nostrum, our sea. Carthage, once the greatest rival to Roman power, was reduced to ashes, its fields salted, its name remembered only as a warning to enemies. With victory after victory, Rome's destiny grew clearer. This was no mere kingdom, no ordinary state. It was something greater, something eternal. Yet perhaps what set Rome apart most of all was the bond between its people and their vision of the state. Rome was not ruled by a king's whims. It was built upon a belief that every citizen, rich or poor, fought not only for survival, but for Rome itself. That sense of collective identity made them resilient in the face of disaster. When invaders burned their fields, when armies outnumbered them, when hope seemed lost, the Romans returned, rebuilt and rose stronger than before. Out of mud huts came marble, out of farmers came soldiers, out of a single settlement an empire was born. By the time the world took notice, Rome was no longer a fragile village clinging to survival. It had become a colossus, a force of discipline, ambition, and relentless drive. And though centuries of conquest lay ahead, the seed had already been planted. This was the rise of Rome, not in an instant, not in a single battle, but in a steady, unyielding march. From myth to power, from dust to destiny, the city on the 7 hills would rise to command the earth. If the rise of Rome was born from resilience, then its dominance was secured by design. No empire in history understood the machinery of power quite like Rome, the art of transforming men, stone and law into an engine that could rule half the known world. At the very heart of this machinery stood the legion. These were not ragged bands of warriors, but disciplined formations that moved as one. Every soldier was trained, drilled and hardened until obedience was instinct. A legion was more than an army, it was a living machine. Shields locked together like the scales of a beast, spears thrust forward in unison. And when the order was given, they advanced with a thunder that made the earth itself tremble. The genius of Rome was not in individual heroism, but in unity. A Roman soldier was one part of a greater whole. Alone, he was ordinary. Together they were invincible. But armies alone cannot hold an empire. Behind the legions came engineers, men whose minds were as sharp as any sword. Where others saw wilderness, Rome saw opportunity. Roads cut across Europe, North Africa and Asia Minor. Thousands of miles of stone, binding distant provinces to the heart of the empire. With them, trade flowed, armies marched swiftly, and messages travelled faster than ever before. Water, too, became Rome's servant. Aqueducts spanned valleys and carried life into cities, ensuring that baths, fountains, and households never ran dry. To step into a Roman city was to step into a marvel of human ingenuity. Bustling forums, towering amphitheatres, and temples that seemed to touch the heavens. These were not merely buildings, they were symbols of Rome's mastery, reminders that the empire was eternal. Yet perhaps the most remarkable machine of all was not forged of stone or iron, but of law. Rome devised a system so sophisticated that it outlasted the empire. From contracts to citizenship, from justice to governance, Roman law provided order in lands far from the city of Rome. It was the glue that bound together a vast mosaic of peoples, languages, and cultures. A farmer in Gaul, a merchant in Egypt, and a soldier in Britannia could all appeal to the same principles, the same authority, the authority of Rome. This machinery of power extended even further. Into the minds of its subjects, Rome offered not only conquest but belonging. To be Roman was to be part of something greater, something enduring. Those who submitted were not always crushed. Many were absorbed. The conquered became citizens, their children enrolled in the legions, their gods given a place beside Jupiter and Mars. Rome's ability to include as well as dominate was a silent weapon, one that made rebellion seem less appealing than assimilation. And yet this vast machine was not cold, not lifeless. It pulsed with ambition, driven by men whose names echo through history. Generals who dreamed of glory, senators who shaped policy, emperors who claimed divinity. Each played their part in keeping the gears of empire turning. The result was staggering. From the deserts of Africa to the forests of Germania, Rome's presence was undeniable. Its armies moved with precision. Its cities gleamed with marble, its laws echoed across continents. No empire before had stretched so wide, nor endured with such strength. This was Rome's secret. Power not as chaos, but as order. A machine vast and complex, yet guided by a single purpose, to conquer, to build, to endure. This was the machinery of power, the beating heart of empire. If Rome's armies carved an empire, and its machines sustained it, then its civilization gave its soul. For while the legions marched and the engineers built, Rome's true brilliance shone in the culture it fostered, a civilization whose light would linger long after its power had faded. Walk through the marble avenues of Rome at its height, and you would see a world unlike any other. The Forum, alive with debate, where senators argued policy beneath statues of gods and heroes. The Colosseum, a towering amphitheatre where thousands gathered to watch spectacles of blood and triumph. Temples pierced the sky with columns and domes, their very scale a testament to divine ambition. To stand amidst these monuments was to feel the presence of an empire that believed itself eternal. But Rome's greatness lay not only in stone. It was in the way it gathered the wisdom of others and made it its own. From Greece came philosophy and art, the musings of Plato and Aristotle, the elegance of marble statues, the drama of the theatre. Rome embraced them, reshaped them, and spread them across the empire. From the East came mystery religions, silks, spices, stories that coloured Roman life with exotic wonder. From Egypt came grain that fed the masses, and knowledge preserved from ancient dynasties. Rome was not a closed world, it was a vast crossroads where cultures intertwined. And from this blending was born something new, Roman identity. It was a way of life, a rhythm of order and grandeur. Baths became more than places to cleanse, they were centres of conversation and politics. Roads were more than stone, they were pathways of commerce carrying ideas as well as goods. The Latin tongue, once confined to a small people, spread across continents, embedding itself so deeply that echoes of it still flow through the words we speak today. Perhaps Rome's most lasting gift was its vision of law and governance. In Rome, citizenship became not just a privilege, but a promise. To be Roman was to belong to something beyond tribe or bloodline. He was an idea. That law could bind people of different lands, languages, and faiths into one unified whole. Concepts of justice, contracts, and rights that survive in modern courts trace their origins back to Rome's courts and senates. The empire also cultivated the arts. Poets such as Virgil and Ovid gave voice to Rome's spirit, weaving myths and histories into verse that stirred both pride and longing. Historians like Livy and Tacitus chronicled the struggles of the Republic and the Empire, preserving lessons that still resonate, of ambition, corruption, and the fragility of power. Yet this civilization was not only for the elite. In Rome's bustling streets, one could hear the laughter of children, the cries of merchants, the chants of priests, and the cheers of crowds in the circus maximums as chariots thundered past. It was a civilization that embraced spectacle, that understood the importance of not only ruling but dazzling its people. Bread and games, food for the belly, wonder for the eyes, became tools of control, but also threads in the fabric of Roman life. In every stone, every word, every law carved a vision of greatness. It was not a civilization of chance, but of design, bold, ambitious, and enduring. And though centuries have passed, the spirit of that civilization still whispers through our cities, our languages, and our laws. This was the glory of Rome, not only in power, but in the brilliance of a civilization that sought to touch eternity. For all its splendor, for all its triumphs, Rome's supremacy came at a cost, a price paid in blood, toil, and suffering. Beneath the marble arches and glittering forums, there lay shadows darker than the empire's brightest glories. Every conquest that expanded Rome's borders came at the expense of lives beyond counting. On the battlefield, legions clashed with enemies who fought desperately to defend their homelands. The earth drank deeply of blood, Carthaginian, Gallic, Germanic, Parthian. Rome's victories, carved into monuments, were bought with the screams of the vanquished and the silence of the fallen. To the victors came triumphs, parades, and honor. To the defeated came chains, exile, or annihilation. For those absorbed into the empire, assimilation was not always gentle. While many found opportunity in Roman citizenship, countless others became slaves, the invisible workforce upon which Rome's might rested. They built the aqueducts, raised the amphitheatres, and toiled in the fields that fed the empire. In the Colosseum, they were cast as gladiators, fighting for survival while thousands cheered. Their labour, their suffering, their very lives were the hidden cost of Rome's magnificence. Even within the city, the disparity between rich and poor grew stark. Senators reclined in opulent villas adorned with mosaics and marble, while the masses crowded into cramped insulae, towering apartment blocks prone to fire and collapse. Bread and circuses kept them docile, but beneath the surface lay unrest, the simmering discontent of those who lived in the shadows of wealth they would never touch. Supremacy also strained Rome itself. The empire stretched wider and wider, but with each new frontier came new dangers. Armies were scattered across deserts, forests, and mountains, constantly at war to hold the line. Resources were drained to maintain this colossal machine. Taxation grew heavier. Soldiers served longer. The burden of empire weighed not only on the conquered, but on Rome's own citizens. And then there was decadence, the slow creeping rot that follows great power. In the courts of emperors, ambition turned to greed, discipline to indulgence. Gold, once used to build roads and cities, was squandered on feasts, jewels, and excess. Senators conspired against one another, generals sought to crown themselves, and emperors demanded to be worshipped as gods. Rome, once hardened by struggle, began to soften under the weight of its own luxury. The greatest danger, however, was not an enemy beyond Rome's borders, but the cracks within. Civil wars tore the Republic apart before the rise of empire. Rival generals marched their legions against Rome itself, turning citizens into enemies, neighbors into foes. Every internal conflict weakened the foundations that had once seemed unshakable. And yet perhaps the most haunting price of all was the toll upon Rome's spirit. The ideals of the early Republic, duty, sacrifice, discipline, gave way to a hunger for power, spectacle, and domination. What began as a city forged in resilience became an empire consumed by its own ambition. So while Rome dazzled the world with its achievements, its supremacy was never free. It demanded sacrifice of soldiers on distant frontiers, of slaves in chains, of citizens burdened with taxes, and of a society slowly losing the values that once made it strong. The grandeur of Rome was undeniable. But grandeur always has a cost, and for Rome the price of supremacy would prove heavy indeed. Empires rise and empires fall. Their monuments crumble, their banners fade, their armies scatter into dust. And yet some leave echoes so profound that centuries cannot silence them. Rome was one such empire. Though its throne was toppled, its crown lost to time, its legacy endures. Etched into the very fabric of our world, step into any modern city, and the ghost of Rome is there, in the arches of government buildings, in the domes of cathedrals, in the straight lines of roads that still follow Roman paths. The aqueducts, though worn by centuries, still stand as silent guardians of human ingenuity. To build in stone and concrete, to shape landscapes with such ambition, this was Rome's gift to architecture, one that still guides the hands of builders today. In language, too, Rome never vanished. Latin, once spoken in markets and forums, became the seed of countless tongues: Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian. Even English, though distant, carries Latin's imprint in its words of law, science, and philosophy. Every time we speak, fragments of Rome live on in our voices. The law courts of today, the systems of governance that organize nations, still bear the stamp of Roman order. Concepts of contracts, rights, and justice, born in the Senate and refined in imperial courts, became the backbone of modern civilization. Rome showed the world that law could bind peoples of different faiths, tongues, and lands under one common rule. The very idea of citizenship, that one might belong to something greater than tribe or bloodline, was Rome's creation, and it remains one of its most enduring legacies. But Rome's shadow stretches further still. In the arenas of politics and power, in the struggles of republics and empires, Rome remains a mirror. Its rise from a small city to global dominance reminds us of ambition's boundless reach. Its fall, torn by corruption, division, and overreach, serves as a warning that no empire, however mighty, is invincible. In Rome's story lies both inspiration and caution, a tale of triumph and tragedy entwined. Even in the realm of faith, Rome left its mark. The empire that once worshipped Jupiter and Mars became the cradle of Christianity, carrying a new religion across continents. The roads that legions once marched became the pathways of missionaries, spreading ideas that would shape the spiritual heart of Europe and beyond. In this, Rome's legacy was not only material but profoundly human, touching hearts as well as minds. And perhaps the most remarkable truth of all, Rome never fully died. Though the Western Empire crumbled in the 5th century, its spirit lived on in the Eastern Empire, Byzantium, for another 1,000 years. Even after its fall, kings, emperors, and nations across Europe would claim Rome's mantle. To be a Caesar, a successor of Rome, was the highest title an ambitious ruler could imagine. 2 millennia later, we still look back. We marvel at Rome's roads and aqueducts, its legions and monuments, its poets and philosophers. We feel awe at what humanity once achieved, and we hear the whisper of a city that believed itself eternal. And in a way, it was. Rome no longer rules the earth. Yet in every courthouse, in every cathedral dome, in every word of Latin origin, in every city that dreams of eternity, Rome endures. This is the true power of empire, not the fleeting roar of armies, but the echo that lingers, the legacy that shapes the future long after the empire itself has turned to dust. This was Rome's final gift to the world, to remind us that even in ruin, greatness can endure forever. So we arrive at the end of Rome's story, a tale of resilience, power, brilliance, and decline. From humble huts upon 7 hills, it rose to command continents. Its legions marched as thunder, its laws carved order from chaos. Its culture dazzled the senses, and its grandeur seemed eternal. Yet, like all things born of human hands, it too was mortal. Rome's rise teaches us the strength of unity and ambition. Its supremacy reminds us that greatness demands sacrifice. Its decline warns us of the dangers of greed, corruption, and complacency. And its legacy, still alive in our cities, languages, and laws, shows us that the echoes of civilization never truly fade. But Rome's story is more than history. It is a mirror, a reminder that even the mightiest empires stand upon fragile foundation. That power left unchecked can consume itself, and that what we build today, in stone, in law, in culture, will become the inheritance of those who follow. The question, then, is not simply what Rome was, but what we will be. Let us learn from Rome's triumphs and from its failures. Let us build not only monuments of stone, but monuments of justice, unity, and wisdom. Let us remember that true greatness is not only measured in power, but in the legacies we leave behind, for history does not belong to the past alone. It belongs to us, here and now, shaping the world we will one day leave for others. This was the age when Rome ruled the earth, and its lesson is ours to carry forward.